Welcome to Do Your Dailies, the podcast designed to help you on your journey of addiction recovery. We're going to go through the big book of AA and use our collective experience, strength, and hope to help you understand what addiction recovery really looks like. So grab some snacks, sit back, press play, and dig deep. Thanks for being here. Welcome to this episode of the Do Your Dailies podcast. I'm your host, Chris, and we hope you're having a great day today. Joe and Dave, how are you guys doing?
Doing very good and looking forward to jumping into chapter 2 today.
It's always a privilege and pleasure to be here. Looking forward to it as well.
Awesome. Okay, so last time, I don't know what episode number, but we spent our time to this point really digging in, and we finished up Bill's story. Before we jump into the solution, any notes to touch on from last time, from where we've been so far?
I was thinking about that this morning, and as I was coming into work, the thought that came to me is that as we were getting ready to give this podcast, I was just reflecting on Bill's journey and how he got so clear as far as like his journey and how aggressive his alcoholism got and how it just destroyed his character and his relationships. And towards the end, he catches the message, and then he takes us through the steps, and then you see this complete transformation in such a short amount of time. And the impression that I was left with as I was thinking about this and reflecting upon it is that it doesn't matter how detrimental or how painful the experience of addiction is, you can always come back, and it can be a very quick recovery. The biggest thing about it is when we get into this chapter, there is a solution. There is not, in my opinion, there isn't just an easy way to get into recovery and hold on to it. It is a daily dive into knowing yourself and looking at the things that work and the things that don't work, and continually committing yourself to the things that do, because life will never throw you the same day or the same stress or challenges each day. It changes constantly. And what we're about to jump into, in my opinion, is like the next step of like what Bill was talking about. Is he was talking about that year and a half journey that he had in early recovery, where he wasn't too well, and then we're jumping into this part of it where we're starting to dig into, okay, tell me more about this issue that an addict and alcoholic actually suffers from, and what is the solution to the problem I'm facing. And my hope in this is that we get a very clear message of really a deep dive into understanding the solution to the problem that has faced anybody that deals with addiction. So that was my insight today.
Yeah, I do have a thought, and that is that what Bill did was he gave us a 10,000 foot view from his start up through the finish. There was a couple of points there where he was rolling pretty highly, and then it got to the point where, should I kill myself? No, not today. And then he talked about, just on one page, just about how lonely and desperate. And then his friend shows up, and even in a drunken state, and I think he told us that purposely, even in a drunken state, he could see something in his friend that he had never seen before. Mm-hmm. And even spoke about the eyes. And then that same process happened to him, and he goes in and says, hey, it rushed through me like a mountain breeze. And on one page, he gives us all of the 12 steps. Now, they weren't delineated, but he told us how he went through it. So it was quite a synopsis. And I'd like to remind everyone that this book, in my opinion, is a textbook. And now we're about to start into the text. Mm-hmm. And what he does, and this is a recurrent theme, he talks about the problem, he talks about a solution, and then he tells us how to implement the solution. And in the foreword to the first edition, it was precisely how we have done this. So what he's about to start into with there is a solution is that preciseness. And so we'll talk about that in chapter 2. It's interesting to me. The title is There Is a Solution. What's the operative word? A.
Yeah.
Now this wasn't just Bill Wilson. If you go back and look at the foreword, we 100 people. And it even says as we talk about this, thousands of men and women. So it went from the first 100 to now they know thousands. And so why would we push away this solution if thousands have done it? Well, gosh, all we're asking is, how about get curious? If thousands have done it, I wonder what's there. Maybe it could work for me. So as we start into this text and we delve into it and we detail it, keep that curiosity, keep that wonderment. How does this fit for me? I think that's an important way to think about it. And I might add that it scaffolds. And what I mean is we understand principle A, and then we can understand principle B. And the way he does it is masterful. And I've got an opinion about why it is, and I'll share that later. But at any rate, it's good stuff. Buckle up. Let's do this.
It is. You said something before we began this episode, Dave, that, even as, and I'll use my own words, but as well-versed as you are in this work and in this book, this context and everything, you're noticing, even as we dive in together, you're seeing things differently. And you mentioned frame of mind, frame of reference, that, along the journey of my life, I can go back over the same unchanged material, but based on where I'm at mentally, spiritually, and psychologically, any other way, I absorb it differently. I interpret it differently, and I'm going to apply it differently. And so to our listeners, that invitation exists. You may listen to this whole thing one way through, right? One time through. Okay, it was great. It was fine. It was good. This is what, this is what I took from it. And maybe somewhere down the line in your life, you listen again. The stuff hasn't changed. The things that we say on a recording in the future it's not going to change. But the message pulled from that very well may. And that's also been my experience throughout my life. Reading the same thing again, but just having evolved myself as a human being, as a man, all the different roles that we have, just paying different attention to things. So that invitation, just to echo that, look deeper, but also look within as you listen to us and as you read along as well. So I'll begin, if that's okay. We of alcohol, and this is on page 17, by the way, chapter 2, there is a solution. We of Alcoholics Anonymous know thousands of men and women who were once just as hopeless as Bill. Nearly all have recovered. They have solved the drink problem. We are average Americans. All sections of this country and many of its occupations are represented, as well as many political, economic, social, and religious backgrounds. We are people who normally would not mix, but there exists among us a fellowship, a friendliness, and an understanding which is indescribably wonderful. I'm going to interrupt that. We normally wouldn't mix. Our society today, just in my observation, our society today, we're looking for the differences. You're in that group, and you're in that group, and I'm in this group, and how we might exclude each other or feel excluded by the world, right, by others. And I love this so much. We might have those differences, but we're together. We're in this together. And I like the way they word that. Indescribably wonderful.
And here's a perfect example. He just stated a truth. And then he's going to tell a story about it. He's going to, and this is what he does over and over. Here's a principle, and I'm going to tell you, I'm using metaphor. He teaches in metaphor so that he makes sure that we understand if we have a mind to see it this way. So we'll talk more about this metaphor in a minute.
I love it. We are like the passengers of a great liner, the moment after rescue from shipwreck, when camaraderie, joyousness, and democracy pervade the vessel from steerage to captain's table. Unlike the feelings of the ship's passengers, however, our joy in escape from disaster does not subside as we go our individual ways.
Hold on. So there it is. What does he mean by we are passengers of a great liner? What that means in today's vernacular is a cruise ship, okay? And the moment after rescue. So apparently this cruise ship, we'll use the Titanic, hit something and it's starting to go down. But then he says the joyousness and democracy pervade the vessel from steerage to captain's table. Well, what does that mean? Captain's table is the most expensive seat on the ship, and steerage is down at the bottom. If you ever saw Titanic, that they showed that. And I personally have seen the difference between steerage and captain. I've never been on captain's table, never been, in steerage, been somewhere in the middle. But there is a distinct difference. And what he's saying is, when we walked on that ship, we were different. We weren't mixing. Captain's table did not mix with the people in steerage and vice versa. But now there's a wreck. And now everybody's just grateful to get in the boat. But then he makes another very, very important point. Unlike the feelings of the ship's passengers, however, our joy in escape from the disaster does not subside as we go our individual ways. So the ship had a problem, and everybody from whoever could got in the lifeboats, but once they got to shore, they hugged and then steerage went this way and captain's table went the other way. Not so in Alcoholics Anonymous. We stay together, and you go to a meeting in the fellowship, we're the same. You may have driven to the meeting in different cars, someone may have walked and such, and he goes on to give a very important piece. Go ahead, Chris.
The feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us. But that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. The tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution.
There it is. So we shared a common peril, and that is we're alcoholic and it's destroying our lives. And the powerful cement that can we pull out of this together? And so what I have circled in my book, there's a common solution for a common peril. That's what this is about. That's what this book is teaching us, that we have discovered a common solution. It's our experience. So when we start talking about what happened to us, and that's why a little later he talks about why one alcoholic can talk to another. When we're really talking about the alcoholic conditions, we're not talking about net worth or vehicles or watches. In other words, what catches someone, and he even describes it, oh, you drink like me. You understand this. You've had the DTs. You can't answer the question like I can't. Why can't I stop when I start? Why can't I drink like, oh, you understand? So that's this common solution and understanding that we're going forward with.
Yeah.
I think that's a very important concept.
There's a connection. There's a you get me. There's the chasm that separates us is gone in this.
Yeah.
I love it. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism.
Now, I'd like to just point out that last piece was so important. It's like addicts and alcoholics, they get to a point to where they have individually destroyed that collective fellowship or association with other people, and they basically remove themselves from any social interaction, and the only thing they're really doing is drinking and using alone. But here we find that he's clearly pointing out that there's a social factor to this, and it brings us together. Instead of continuing to allow us to isolate ourselves, it will change us in this process. So that solution is also changing the way that we interact and socialize, whereas before we weren't doing that. So that common solution isn't just a common solution about the problem itself. It's like the other problems that are associated with the disease are also being addressed as well.
Yeah. He makes a very important statement here. We can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is not a spectator sport. You can't buy a ticket and go and watch this. So he puts action, the common solution to the common peril. And then he's going to go on and explain more of that. But I just want to point out, he's very clear, this takes some more individual work, supported by a fellowship, that each person has to do it. The fellowship cannot do it for you.
Yeah.
You must do your work. And we'll define what that means later.
On to page 18. An illness of this sort, and we have come to believe it an illness, involves those about us in a way no other human sickness can. If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him, and no one is angry or hurt. But not so with the alcoholic illness, for with it there goes annihilation of all the things worthwhile in life. I cannot tell you the number of times that has come up in therapy groups, working in residential treatment, just that distinguishment.
Mm-hmm.
We look at this as a disease, a brain disease, right? But we look at this from the perspective of there's no, maybe I don't want to say no. There's far less grace offered to the addict or alcoholic than the cancer patient, than the person with a physical ailment of some sort through accident. There's judgment placed upon this, so much of that. And so I love that distinguishment. If a person has cancer, everyone's sorry. No one's angry.
Yeah.
Right? How dare you get cancer? How dare you do those things? You did it again, right?
Well, what's the assumption there?
It's a choice.
It's a choice.
Yeah.
And so we're very clear. We say, yes, this is a disease. So was there no moral issue involved here? I say absolutely there is, and we won't get into that now, but just hold.
Yep.
If you're listening to this, make a note on your paper. What is the moral condition that involves this? Because it's there. But he's very clear. Yes, this is a disease, but it involves everyone around us like no other sickness can. And he goes on to even talk about it. Go ahead and read that, Chris.
It engulfs all whose lives touch the sufferers. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of blameless children, sad wives and parents. Anyone can increase the list.
I think it's important to note here, this is not something he heard back in that day on a television.
No.
He's talking
Lived
from his
experience.
he lived it. And many of the others that he walked through, the thousands, how many stories has he heard? So he's just giving us an accurate report. And many of us, the reason he does this is because we are the first to be in denial. How many times have you heard this? My drinking hasn't affected anyone. I heard it in my own family.
Yeah.
My drinking hasn't affected anyone. Really? That's your opinion, but I get to have mine. So he's very detailed in this and saying, whether you believe it to be true or not, this is the truth. And I think I'll just say it out loud here again and again. What Bill Wilson does and this group, they talk about truth. What is the truth? Not what you think, not what you want it to be, but what is the truth? And that's a big piece of truth right there that I think we need to embrace and just acknowledge.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be inflammatory. It doesn't have to be accusatory, passing blame, or anything. Just, this is how it is.
Yeah.
This is how it is. All right. We hope this volume will inform and comfort those who are or may be affected. There are many. Highly competent psychiatrists who have dealt with us have found it sometimes impossible to persuade an alcoholic to discuss his situation without reserve. Strangely enough, wives, parents, and intimate friends usually find us even more unapproachable than do the psychiatrist and the doctor. What does that mean?
Why is that?
Well, my experience is that I will lie to medical professionals, but I can't lie to the people that have been in the trenches with me.
But why do we even want to lie? Sometimes impossible to persuade an alcoholic to discuss his situation We're not going to tell the truth. What? Because that's how the disease works. I'm going to tell you a little bit and you a little bit, but nobody gets in to see the wizard. I'm back there, the old 1942 Wizard of Oz and the big, whatever it was, and he's back there with, all kinds of smoke and loud and running all the levers, and nobody gets in to see the wizard. Nobody gets the truth. That's just part of our addiction. That's just part of the disease.
That relationship between alcohol and drugs gets so pervasive that I think that idea of like keeping it a secret, from its very inception, is what's really interesting typically is that we don't talk about even that internal process of like, if we know it's a problem, we're still trying to convince ourselves that it's not a problem. So therefore, I'm going to pretend and I'm not going to address your issues or your issues. And if you bring it to me, I'm going to deny that I've got an issue, then I've still got control. See, look, I haven't drank for 2 days. I've got control. Mm-hmm. The problem with that is that with what he's sharing right here, it's like he's saying that as we go through that process, that impossibility to persuade others actually occurs because of the fact that we're not attached to truth. We're attached to the idea of like, I want to see it this way, so I'm gonna project that onto your reality and your reality, and I'm gonna deny. And it's like we don't get into transformation and recovery until we start at that very perspective of like the honesty of the reality that we live in. And this piece where it says, strangely enough, wives, parents, and intimate friends usually find us even more unapproachable than do the psychiatrists and the doctors. And to the point I was trying to make is like, when our loved ones that have experienced kind of that relationship that we have with drugs and alcohol, and they see what's going on, and yet we're trying to convince them and sell them on the idea of the way that we see it, not the way they've experienced it. Doctors and psychiatrists, they don't have that perspective, but our family members have like seen the reality, and they're more steeped into the truth of it, but they also don't necessarily talk about it due to the nature of how that just builds into everybody's part of the secret, and we're not going to air family laundry, right?
I look at it very simply here, Chris. I think this is a nice way to say, and I'll just speak about myself, I'm an abject, disgusting liar in my addiction. That's it. I'm not going to discuss it without reserve. Why? Because I'm not going to tell the truth. And there was a time, I won't go into much detail, but I was called Teflon. Nothing stuck to me, and a person looked at me and said, how is it that you do something and by the time we're done discussing it, it's all my fault, this person said. Nothing sticks to you, Dave. And I just thought, I lie for sport. I was a professional liar, and I could create, and I could look, I could gaslight, I would use any tool I needed to. And so to you, the listener, ask yourself, are you there? Are you doing any of this? Because I certainly was. I'm not talking about somebody else's story. I'm talking about mine. And it's incredible, the lies. And I was, man, I got to be careful here, but I was approached with something, and I had a decision. Do I tell the truth, or do I just double down, quadruple down? I got to stay with this, because if I admit to this, then what else? That's going to possibly open the floodgates.
Yeah.
But I thought if I double or quadruple down, I could lose this relationship. No, can't do it. I am believable, and I quadrupled down. Mm-hmm. And finally, this person looked at me and said, "Do you really believe that I believe what you're saying right now? Do you look me in the eye and tell me, do you really believe that I'm buying this story? You got to be kidding, Dave." And at that moment, I realized just how disgusting I was in this lie. And not lie, it was a series, it was an entire genre. Yeah. And that's what I had turned into, just this lying, manipulative person. And I knew out the back door, if I can just get out of this, I was like, slippery, man. If I can just get out of this, then I can get back to, I can medicate this pain with. So I think this is a very important piece.
Layer upon layer of fiction and story and our, how did you say it? Narrative, history, right? This is how I saw it. And like you said, if I can just get out of this situation right now, we'll move on and everyone will forget. Or no one will have the guts to confront me about it. Absolutely. No one will bring it back up.
So what was interesting is as you two were just talking, I just had this thought. It's like, okay, our addiction then turns into another type of addiction, and that other addiction is trying to convince the denial that we live in to pass it on to other people to make everybody delusional.
Yeah.
I that's codependency, but the problem with that is that that's another level of addiction that many of us actually carry into relationship. And what's interesting here is that we rarely talk about how the addiction affects other people, but it's like everything that we've been talking about is like nailing that down. Is like there's the primary addiction, but there's also secondary addictions that are showing up too. And we never look at that because we're all just consumed with, how do I hide this? How do I make sure that I am not known? Because, I mean, you know me, that means that, oh my gosh, I might have to do something even more drastic. Beyond just not telling the lies, it also means I might have to stop drinking. Or maybe even deeper than that, it's like, now I have to do something really radical beyond just that stuff. Is like really digging in and trying to change me. In my alcoholism, the way I looked at it is like everybody else had the problem. I didn't. I was fine. And I didn't want the mirror held up to me. And when I did, I avoided it like the plague. And I'm grateful that he's actually talking about that right off the bat. It's like, hey, there's this mirror, and this is what happens. And then all of a sudden, we're starting to actually look into this thing called, perspective. And that perspective is like, is it a truthful perspective, or is it a false perspective that I'm just holding on to because my mind is saying, don't go there?
Well, I think that's exactly why he says, found it sometimes impossible. So these are psychiatrists, to persuade the alcoholic to discuss his situation without reserve. In other words, discuss it, Dave, in truth. What's the truth about your drinking? Why was it impossible for them to persuade me? Because of my ego, and it was built on sand, and I don't want this whole mechanism to fall apart. I have to stay in this condition, in this lie. And so he's very clear on this.
There's a huge ego hit that will have to take place for the individual to say, yep. And I'm not saying that we even verbalize it, but to admit, yeah, I was lying to you this whole time. I was making that up. And so that's one reason I think we double and triple and quadruple down.
Yeah.
Is because how am I going to go to this person and go, yeah, I was lying to you?
Yeah.
The brain is already kind of set up that downhill from there, that the path of least resistance, or so we believe in that moment, is to just let me navigate through this and just get to the other side. Next chapter of whatever that looks like in life.
What he's describing here is the reason that this is a disease of shame. We know what we've done.
Yeah.
The alcoholic, I won't use third person. I'll use myself. I knew what I had done. I knew what was going on. I knew what I was destroying. It's one thing for me to know it, but it's another thing for me to look you in the eye and tell you.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to go there. And because that's just going to just heap more shame on me. And at that point, I had no solution. I didn't know how to get out from underneath that. That's why he's telling this. He's identifying with us and saying he knows. He was there too. And that's why it's so important that we identify it and name it, so that we get on the same page. And then he's then going to, isn't it interesting, in the chapter called The Solution, we have to name the problem first. Because we don't talk about the problem. What are we talking about?
Yeah.
You can't talk about a solution to something that doesn't exist or that I don't have.
Right.
You're giving me a solution, but I say, well, I don't have that problem. What?
But that's easier and softer to digest. Is we'll just expand this into living right, living well. No, it's okay to acknowledge there's some stuff happening.
Yeah.
There's some pain. There's some darkness going on.
What is the truth about my situation? Okay.
So I'm interested in, just to listen real fast. This is hitting home. If this is kind of striking a nerve a little bit, take a deep breath. You may even need to hit pause for a minute and get some sunlight, get some fresh air, go for a walk or whatever, and then return. But we want to be bold. We want you to be bold and dig into this. We want that transformation for you. We seek it ongoing for ourselves. We want to continue to improve, to innovate, to change, to enhance our lives. And now, I had this other thought about that last sentence. Wives, parents, and intimate friends usually find us even more unapproachable. Dave, you said the word shame a moment ago. And I want to add on to that word disappointment. And how often do we put people on a pedestal that are so close to us? Mm-hmm. Right or wrong about the pedestal? I'm not judging it as appropriate or inappropriate. But we have expectations for those people in our world. We expect them to do no harm to us. We expect them to be safe. We expect them to follow through, right? And so when they don't, there is a natural barricade that distances us, that separates us in a way, okay? I think that exists both ways.
Yeah.
So, the addict or alcoholic, Dave, a moment ago, you said, I'll speak for myself. I'll speak for myself. When I've been in that position where I know what's going on, I know the secret, this person can't find out because of the grave disappointment that I will be. Mm-hmm. Not what I did, but me as a human being. And in this world, as we're teaching healing and as we're coaching recovery and we're doing therapies and counseling and those kinds of things, we go, but you're not your actions. We're trying to separate that. Mm-hmm. We're trying to disconnect it. But in that pit of addiction, the darkness of wallowing in that hole, there's no difference. The person who's still suffering in that way, in that depth, doesn't recognize, oh, that was my choice. That's what I did. Mm-hmm. No, they embody that. There's this belief, this sick, twisted, insidious belief that I am all of my horrible choices. I am all of my sins. I am all of those failures. And so there's a tendency, I think, to back away from those loved ones. The wives, parents, intimate friends, children, colleagues, so on and so forth, to disconnect, to numb out. And so you mentioned codependency just a moment ago as well. And I think that's a factor. And we'll dive into that. We got plenty of book left. But I want to bring those things up and kind of just invite the listener to pay attention, to notice when that comes up along this journey. The role of shame, disappointment, it's a beast. And unfortunately, it is, in my experience and observation, has sent people back out and will continue to send people back out because that lack of feeling worthy or enough, good enough, feeling like we don't matter, that we're not worthy of grace or salvation of some sort, somebody's forgiveness, and in my experience, it's been that the people that are closest to us are cheering us on. They want us to succeed.
Yeah.
They want us to be well. They want us to be happy. And there are those who will say, okay, that's enough. Enough is enough. I can't handle this anymore. But we we tell ourselves some pretty serious stories along the way when we're suffering, that people can't handle it. Go ahead.
So that's why they're unapproachable. I can avoid the psychiatrist and the doctor. I just don't make an appointment.
Yeah.
But how do I avoid the people I live with? They see my ebb and flow. It's not just a one-off appointment. They see me day after day, hour after hour, the weekends, whatever, they see me. The greatest lie I believe that we tell ourselves, the greatest lie that I told myself is that I have them all fooled. No way in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Today, I've been married 40 plus years. My wife knows precisely what I need to pull off my workouts. Here, you need to eat this. I don't want to eat. If you don't eat this, you can't. I don't want to have you come home and tell me you couldn't finish the workout because you didn't eat. You got to eat this. You got to drink something. You need fuel. She knows, and she's made this comment. I know you better than you know yourself, Dave. And you know what? She's absolutely right. My point is, why are we unapproachable? Because lies and that we don't want to confront it. We're just going to, if we can duck and weave and tell another story and just add a little bit of narrative and just go on our way. Why is he putting this in here? Because he lived it himself. He couldn't duck and weave from his wife. Well, he did for a while, but she knew him. Her thin purse he referred to earlier. Mm-hmm. So I think this is a very, very important paragraph. And what I would invite the listener to do, and this takes some grit, this takes some courage, and I wouldn't ask you to do anything I haven't done. Sit down with a pad of paper, write your full name across the top, and just write down, what are the lies that you're telling yourself? You see, I'm not concerned about the lies you tell others. What are the lies you're telling yourself? And write them. What names have you used to describe yourself in the quiet of the night? I know all about that. We need to write that out. We need to come full on, face to face with the lies that we're telling ourselves. What is the truth about my drinking? And you don't have to share this with anybody. Just start with, can I sit down and literally write out what the truth is about me, about what I call myself, the names I'm using? What is alcohol doing to me?
Yeah. Not
anyone else, not work, and just you. And when I did that, I don't know how many tears I shed, but it was a watershed moment in both ways. Yes, I shed a lot of tears, but there was great relief that I was coming full on facing the truth about where I was and what I was doing, and that started the process. So I encourage you to try that exercise, and call in, write in, whatever, and say what happened. What was it like for you to face those truths?
Thank you. This next paragraph is italicized, so take note. It says, but the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, who is properly armed with facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. That the man who is making the approach has had the same difficulty, that he obviously knows what he is talking about, that his whole deportment shouts at the new prospect, that he is a man with a real answer, that he has no attitude of holier than thou, nothing whatever except the sincere desire to be helpful, that there are no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. These are the conditions we have found most effective. After such an approach, many take up their beds and walk again. None of us makes a sole vocation of this work, nor do we think its effectiveness would be increased if we did. We feel that elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. All of us spend much of our spare time in the sort of effort which we are going to describe. A few are fortunate enough to be so situated that they can give nearly all their time to the work.
I'm wondering if we ought to hold there for just a second. Isn't it interesting? Going back to what you said, Chris, the next paragraph was italicized. So he goes right from, here's the truth about you, and then he goes right to helping another. But what he says is this: who is properly armed with facts about himself. In other words, he's got the list, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He did the list. That wasn't Dave's idea to come up with the list about the truth. In other words, before I go talk to another man, which is really important, I better be armed with the facts about himself or myself. In other words, you can't give away what you don't have. You can't ask someone to do something you haven't done. You've got to do this. There's a lot of work to be done. And he goes on to say that elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. There's an important saying I'd like to share right here. Abstinence gets us out of a bad place. So he's talking about eliminating our drinking. That's abstinence. That gets us out of a bad place. But that's not the same as getting us into a good place. That's recovery. So we have to stop drinking, but then there's a tremendous amount of work to be done. And that he's teaching us that. You can't be in recovery and drinking.
Yeah.
The principles just don't work. You got to have all your mental pistons firing. You have to have the heart and soul. But first of all, we got to stop. And I mean, how many people? I don't know about you guys, but how many people said, "Hey, just stop," and you'll be amazed at what happens. Well, why didn't I think of that? I mean, you're kidding me. If I just stop, all this will happen. Well, I can't stop, and I wouldn't have admitted that because I didn't understand the disease. I didn't understand the allergy and the obsession. The point being is, he's giving us a very plain description. Drinking is but a beginning, the elimination. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us. We don't even have those principles yet. We're about to learn and embrace those things. So I think that's a very, very important piece. How long have we been going, by the way?
Well, I'm thinking that I'll read this next paragraph, if that's okay with you guys. I kind of like it. And then we'll press pause
Okay.
on this particular episode unless there are any objections. And I'll echo that challenge, Dave, to do the work, to dig in. This next paragraph says this: if we keep on the way we are going, there is little doubt that much good will result. But the surface of the problem would hardly be scratched. Those of us who live in large cities are overcome by the reflection that close by hundreds are dropping into oblivion every day. Many could recover if they had the opportunity we have enjoyed. How then shall we present that which has been so freely given us? Gentlemen, this discussion, as much as we talk about doing this for our listeners, and listeners, we are doing this for you, but there is a selfish aspect to this, where I, in particular, am approaching this as a newcomer, as a beginner. What can I learn? What have I missed? What is new for me? And I felt something very cool today, very inspiring and very encouraging. So I thank you both for being here, for being present, for showing up and bringing your hearts and your minds. And to our listeners, we thank you for joining us on this episode of the Do Your Dailies podcast. As always, we hope this has been beneficial for you, that you will do a little homework between episodes, that you will dig in, that you will feel inspired, that there is always hope, that you are not alone, that you don't have to do this alone. You're not the only one, and that you're loved. No matter how many times the brain might say those evil, nasty things, that negative self-talk, it's not true. You belong. You belong with us. You're welcome with us. You're welcome in the rooms. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for checking out this episode of the Do Your Dailies podcast. If you like what you hear and what we're talking about, please like and subscribe and share this show with your friends. That's the best way to support us bringing you more content. You can follow us on YouTube and Facebook at Do Your Dailies and on X at Do Your Dailies _. This podcast is brought to you by Hobble Creek Behavioral Health and is edited and produced by Motley Sounds.